Shannon Boschy, School Zone 6 OCDSB candidate for October 24th elections, Ottawa school board elections, along with municipal elections happening at the same time, and we're heating up in the campaign. Um, I want to say some things today about a person by the name of, who goes by the name of Christian Wright or Xander Wright. That person is the leader of the Rose, which is a Rainbow Ottawa student experience. He is coordinated with the Rainbow Carleton organization and has ties to antihate.ca, which is a government funded organization that claims to be against hatred and which routinely slanders and attacks people who speak openly and freely about what's happening in our society. They're a type of a thought control enforcement, and they most recently today there's stuff on Twitter about the materials they've produced for public school education, where the Canadian red ensign flag, that's the flag up until I think it was 1967 that Canada had, is now being declared a racist symbol, a lot like the Confederate flag in the United States. And they are teaching children that conservatives have been infiltrated by racists, and therefore is an undesirable worldview. And taxpayers are funding this, and schools are taking these materials and indoctrinating children politically in schools. And in some cases, if a child is coming from a conservative home, they're being taught that their parents are racists, categorically. This is an atrocious organization. It has no place in Canadian civil discourse. They are a thought police, and they have an enforcement arm that includes their own trials, basically their kangaroo court assigning labels and on their targets with no evidence, with really no journalistic integrity whatsoever, and they're doing a hit piece on me today, so I look forward to seeing that come out. But I do want to talk about Christian Wright. That's Wright, Christian Wright, not the Christian Wright, like, Tipper Gore and her censorship of profane rap lyrics in the late 1980s and 90s. Although the more I think about it, the more similarities I see between Christian Wright and the Christian Right. It is a type of moral outrage that this person traffics in, and hysteria. And the hysteria is that he is a constant victim, and all the people in his world are constant victims, and they're oppressed and they're abused and offended, and they claim all kinds of harms. So Christian Wright was interviewed in the CTV piece that was done about us, myself and Chanel Fall, on Sunday this week. And he claims that our existence causes him and the trans community harms. And that we're harming children with our bigotry and transphobia. These are unspecified harms. Then I'm going to come back to this in a minute. Uh, these unspecified harms uh, are kind of follow this unbelievably narcissistic model of the world that says my feelings are somehow your responsibility, or vice versa. Christian Right's feelings require that the world caters to him and his worldview and his sensitivities, because for some reason he's that important. Um, this language causing harm is bullshit. It is a way of false victimizing and claiming to be victims with no accountability whatsoever, no evidence, no proof, no, like, I'm sorry, prove to me that your feelings are hurt by me having a different political opinion of you, Mr. Wright. The Christian right in the 1950s, rock and roll and the devil's music, and oh my God, the moral outrage and panic, and all of these things about the harms that are going to be done by rock music to children, and the sexual licentiousness that's going to result from this, and the hysteria about the drug wars in the early 80s, and the moral panics about rap music and explicit lyrics, and how like Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know if you remember, but I do. My church and lots of communities possessed by these Christian rights were trying to ban kids from playing Dungeons and Dragons in the 1980s because of it's going to cause harms. A Christian right has a WRIGHT Christian right has a different political bent than what we remember from the hysterical Christian right in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. We've got the same kind of moral outrage and sensibility of inquisitors and thought police that we had from the Christian right. This person was responsible, in part, along with our mayoral candidate, Catherine McKenney, and school board trustee, Lyra Evans, and the OCDSB. In October, they sent a letter to all parents warning about transphobia and bigotry. And they whipped up a mob. There was three of us peacefully standing on a street corner, on a public street, exercising our right to freedom of expression and freedom of conscience in Canada, trying to raise awareness for an important issue that's affecting our children. And that is the exploding numbers of trans-identified kids in our society. There is no argument or case to say that this is somehow a natural expression of things that we've repressed as society forever. The numbers across generations make no sense whatsoever. The numbers are up by 50 to 100 times. 9% of kids in Pittsburgh public schools are identifying themselves as trans, non-binary, or they don't know their gender. A Pew Research study recently, people under 30, it is 5% of them are identifying as trans or gender non-conforming. That's 1 in 20 people. Whereas the numbers just a generation ago were 1 in 5,000 people. Those numbers don't make any sense. And if they did, if it was just simply an opening up of or a liberalization of our values to allow people to become so-called who they really are, we would see just as many adults in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s who are suddenly coming out as gender nonconforming because they've been repressed for all of history. It's just not happening. We're seeing an enormous explosion. It's a social contagion that's affecting our children. Schools are participating in this and encouraging the social contagion. Hospitals, people like Christian Wright and his hysterias and his feelings about harms are participating in this hysteria. And it is itself causing significant harms. When you look at the gender medicalization of children and the administration of puberty blockers and the manner in which we're doing it in Canada, and the combination of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers are not a pause button. People say, oh, they're harmless, it's a pause button. It's not the case. They're toxic cancer drugs, and court documents from the UK reveal that 98.7% of the time, that's the number, 98.7% of the time, cross-sex hormones follow puberty blockers, and that 1-2 combination, the euphemism is becoming who you really are, and allowing expression of identity. But that combination and what we're hiding is that those children are being sterilized. Sexual dysfunction, a lifetime of sexual dysfunction and sterilization is what we're doing. We're wrapping it in rainbows and we're calling it inclusion. And people like Xander Wright or Christian Wright, whatever name he happens to be going by at this point, are complicit in this. Now, reports, the CAS report, the CAS review report on the Tavistock Gender Clinic in the UK was just published in its entirety. It came out as an interim several months ago. It resulted in the condemnation and the closure of the Tavistock GIDS Clinic, Gender Identity Services in the UK, the world's largest pediatric gender clinic. And some of the condemnation is this. that an environment of censorship and abuse, a toxic environment that silenced all criticism and silenced all reasonable communication around an issue with practice of calling any questions or any pushbacks or concerns transphobic, bigotry, all these things, the exact same thing that and language that Christian right traffics in, that and antihate.ca, by the way. And the result of this was that they intimidated practitioners, medical and psychotherapeutic practitioners who didn't agree with the ideological assertions of gender ideology, were forced out of the clinic. A huge turnover. There was whistleblowers. A guy by the name of Graham Linehan is kind of central to this documentation and these whistleblowing events, and he himself was canceled in the UK. But all of these abuse tactics, these lies, these slanders, when Christian Wright and the Rainbow Carlton Coalition and Rose mobilized people in October, estimates were that 300 people descended on three of us. Now, they were screaming that we should be run over by buses, that we should kill ourselves, that we were killing trans kids, and they were pushing us around. We had liquids poured on us. Chris was spray painted. His property was vandalized. His car was vandalized. And these people are screaming death. It was one of the most profound and frightening moments in my existence, to be surrounded and mobbed by 300 people like that who claim to be anti-bullies. This is the hysteria of Christian right that's reformed in organizations that claim to be left. These are abusive, borderline violent groups. I've come to call them routinely the rainbow jackboots. They attempt to control speech. They attempt to control relationships. They practice canceling. When they don't get their way, they go and cry to their mommy. So Christian Wright has gone to antihate.ca, and he went to CTV with allegations about transphobia and bigotry, and smearing me and telling lies, and attempting to get authority figures to enforce his worldview. This is cancel culture laid apparent in front of us all. I'm doing my best to speak openly. If there are people who can have a reasonable discussion and we can explore the issue of trans medicalization and the systemic infiltration of trans ideology into our public schools, our universities, our hospitals, our government, our media, our corporations, every rainbow in every window. And anyone who questions it is called a bigot. Well, we're hiding medical atrocities. There are 200 to 250 kids a year going through CHEO Gender Clinic now. Without even a first appointment, there's a London, Ontario gender clinic that's giving puberty blockers to kids without an appointment. These are toxic cancer drugs. The company that makes Lupron was found to be a criminal organization at the turn of the century. They were fined almost $1 billion for unethical sales practices. And you know what they charge for puberty blockers for a year? Between 20 and 40,000 US dollars, depending on how they're administered, per child. Christian Wright is covering this up. And anyone who's defending this rainbow coalition, these rainbow jackboots, are covering this up. We are covering up atrocities, medical experiments, medical fertility experiments being performed on vulnerable children in Canada. My name is Shannon Boschy. I'm running for the lowly position of OCDSB, Ottawa Carleton District School Board Trustee in Zone 6. That's the Rideau, Vanier, Rockcliffe, and Sandy Hill area of Ottawa. I'm running to raise awareness of what we're doing to our kids in schools and the pipeline that the kids are on, from the schools right through medicalization, where we're sterilizing vulnerable kids. 35% of the kids at that Tavistock clinic in the UK had autism. There's high comorbidities between depression, anxiety, cutting, eating disorders, obsessive disorders, autism spectrum, Asperger's, and a number of other serious and significant mental health issues that these kids are facing. The hospital in the UK, the largest gender clinic for kids in the world, was found to have narrowed their focus entirely, excluding all other possibilities, settling on gender, and handing these medications out, and in some cases, performing surgeries, removing healthy organs from these children and young adults who were vulnerable and suffering from other mental health conditions. This hasn't made these kids better. And as the thousands of detransitioners are coming out, many of whom are speaking publicly, we are recognizing this for the atrocity that it is. And we like to think, wow, we learned about atrocities conducted in the 20th century by various totalitarian forms of government. We like to think that we live in a world where that doesn't happen anymore. Well, have a look. It's happening now.